Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 386. I am Loren Gray, your host, and thank you for joining us on the last show of 2022. Of course, this isn't our show is ending. We just do it every year. We're in our ninth year now every week. It's the last show we get to squeeze in for this year. And for that reason, we're doing what everybody else does this time of year. It's actually a fun time of year when everybody kind of looks back on 2022. I love the TV program where they talk about the news features or the highlights, and unfortunately, the people that we've lost and so forth. But the stories that made the biggest headlines or the things that happened this year in review. I'm not really going to be looking too much into the back of 2022. We have all the shows from 2023 to go look at and to kind of recount what was happening at particular times, what we were concerned about, or things that we were doing at that time. This was more of a conversation for what we're going to go into for 2023 for hospitality marketing. The anticipations of things that are going to be of influence to us in 2023. It's kind of we always deal with certain milestones in the way we approach things, and the fiscal year transition is one of them, regardless of where you are in the world or what religions is to different New Year's or what have you. There is a transition from a previous year record to a new year record. And those changes usually incur thoughtful retrospection and forward optimism as to what goes on. And for that reason, 2023, this year is kind of an odd step. The New Year's Day is actually on a Sunday, which from a personal point of view is an interesting transition on weeks as well. But it's also meaning that you're not starting with an immediate holiday. That's Monday. It's an observed holiday for New Year's. So Tuesday is kind of our start to the year. And for us in the industry, as budgets conclude for 2022, today is the last day for the budget to be used, really. Saturday, possibly a little bit if you're doing paid campaigns. Tuesday's kind of an odd, interesting mid-ish week to get started. We're at that time of year that one of two things usually happens. Either it's hard to get things done because everyone is already taking personal time off and holiday time and travel time and so forth. Or everybody's trying to get as much as they can done before the end of the year, because the year's running out and budgets are running out and opportunities to make year-end functions are running out. And for that reason, excuse me, there's a high pressure to get things done. And I tend to find that this year was one of those years. There was a lot of emphasis on trying to get as much done before the end of the year as possible, kind of as a bit of a catch-up, because for us, 2022 started at a different pace than we're used to. Different priorities, different issues, and of course, we'll do a retrospect in the coming weeks as to what 2022 influence was on 2023. But 2023 is actually starting from a perspective of, okay, now what? We're back into some regular normalcy in the sense of familiar territory from previous to COVID. And for that reason, we have a chance to go over and see how we can approach the year more traditionally. And I know these words seem a little bit out of place because as we went through the whole time of the new normal and all the buzzwords that went along with it, we had a paradigm of shift as to how we see and prepare for changes. And these changes in this past year, as the influence of 2023, are rather profound, but not in the forefront. I wouldn't say sublime. Let me take in case in point something about a prognostication I have for 2023. And that is, where is social as we know it going? If you click back a year, Facebook was a massively valued company compared to what it is now. It lost 75% of its value this past year. It was the archpin of platforms for social media marketing. It had some of the most robust targeting capable out there. As a matter of fact, it was getting sued and pursued because it had was using a tremendous amount of data that it wasn't letting its people know, its users, us, know were being used for vendors like us, again, as marketers. And it was going through a lot of litigations as to the discoveries of the amount of data. But more importantly, a poison seed, as it were, was planted about a year and a half before the beginning of this year, when Apple took the stand of privacy, and they went on and released iOS 14, their operating system, which allowed for the confirmation and indication as to what platforms were gathering what data from you. Facebook, up to that point, had been fighting it tooth and nail because it was negative to what they based their model on, which was having all of this data to be able to sell to us as marketers, to target the consumers that they had on their platform. which is hundreds of billions of people. And for that reason, when it came out, it was then downplayed by Facebook. Oh, it only represents about 11% of our users. It really won't begin to skew the accuracy or value of the ads that you're placing on our platform. Well, it turned out to be almost 50%, because even though it may have been 11% of iOS users, they represented about, well, not completely 50%, but it's questionable, the amount of actual purchase power associated with where the targeting ads were going to. So this past year, Facebook is not as relevant as it was before. It's still relevant. It's still a key component to a marketing strategy. It's still a valuable component to what you're doing for targeting, but its value proposition has diminished. If you were to tell us a year ago that TikTok would be the #1 social media platform, we'd be scratching our heads like, how is that even possible? You have no room for another platform. We have our Facebook, we have our Twitter. And now here, as we click into 2023, Twitter is in some chaotic shambles, which is spiraling of what is it going to do and how authentic is it and how much of a problem is. We have a post hangover as to our polarity of politics, and this extremism that we've been living under for so many years. Excuse me. And we have all of these influences now that we're looking, I wouldn't say for escapism, but we're looking for entertainment and engagement. And TikTok was a visual platform alternative. It is a marketing platform. It is a part of our conversation because it's a marketing platform, but it's reaching now into a world where 18 states in the United States and the federal government and certain divisions have banned the ability for the platform to be on any of the phones or equipment that they use because of security issues, because it is in fact a Chinese-based owned company. And the data that it is able to acquire in its platform is very profound. And we begin to realize this as consumers, that we're seeing more and more what is of innocent entertainment can be manipulated in such a way. You know, we see these wonderful facial character recognition softwares that you can make some stylized version of yourself. And all you have to do is go front, sides, and so forth, the pictures of it, and then it now creates this visualization of you in any format that you want. And what you've just done in technical terms is given away your facial ID. You now give it to a platform that has the rights to it and has no repercussions legally if you look at their terms and conditions of being able to go back and say, give me that content back, give me that information back. You're using it against me. And it can be. We're beginning to get smarter about it, but we're not a lot of us in that sense. There's still a tremendous amount of people that love the stylized pictures and so forth. And that being said, we share pictures of ourselves. So it's not as if we aren't already giving away our ID because of who we are. We share a bajillion pictures. Look at all the selfies, literally selfies. But the fact that you're actually giving it in context that can be used that way is a step up from that. So here we are with social. TikTok is now the #1 time consumption online, above Google, above YouTube, above Facebook. Facebook is about 75% of its value. It also, for the first time this past year, was on a downward projection of new users versus people that the previous month. So it wasn't growing every month over month. It had actually declined in its user rate this past year. And we're going into next year with that. We have TikTok and its legal uncertainties. We have Twitter and its authentication and usability spiralings. We have Facebook and its validation of value contribution and so forth. And so here's social. And now we're seeing that, for instance, the US government is actually looking at moving legislation forward that would hold people liable for what they post on social. They're changing fundamentally, or they're proposing to change fundamentally, the perspective of social media communication. That it's not a free speech issue, that I can say what I want whenever I want. And look at the absolute nasty stuff that went around with Sandy Hook, the tragedy that was denied by someone, and the fact that they could walk around and say what they've said and create the pain and the sorrow that they did, hiding behind the free speech was anyway. The idea that these things are in our world creates some skepticism. We're changing fundamentally where we're gathering information from. I would like to include with that in the 2023 ideas that the OTT TV, CCV, is now much more of an influence than we are currently giving credit for in our marketing strategy. For those that may not be familiar with the concept of OTT TV, it is the programmable TVs, the smart TVs that we have been using now for many years. We've used platforms such as Roku, Samsung, Google TV, Apple TV, These are all on demand. We choose what it is we want to watch when we want to watch it. And you've seen a massive influx of very large organizations in this. Disney Plus, um, Paramount, Peacock. They've all decided that this is where they're going to go because the model of broadcasting has changed. If you think back in time, the broadcasting was based on the fact that an entity, a broadcasting company like CBS, NBC, and ABC, would produce content. It then had its affiliate stations that were granted its franchise rights in the location that it had broadcast coverage in. So a company, say in Des Moines, Iowa, would go to the FCC and petition to get a license on a frequency that they could broadcast on, that they would offer broadcast content, and they had guidelines to follow and so forth. And then they would go to an affiliation. And if there was already an affiliation with ABC or NBC, then CBS was the only other affiliation they could pursue if one had already been there. And so you got a license to go over the space. If this doesn't sound familiar from a branding perspective for hotels, I don't know what does. But that model existed, which meant that the channel that had the franchise license, that had the broadcast license to that market, was your source of data from that broadcast entity. To watch the production of ABC product, you had to watch the ABC channel in your market to see it. Then came cable, and cable allowed you to have a broad general spectrum from a source without necessarily a local broadcaster to share it. Well, we have Fox News, but that's another story. The idea was that this was the way that we communicated. But if you think of it, it is also very centralized because the people that controlled the content generated for ABC or CBS or NBC were powerful. And we say that for a fact because we know historically they were. They dictated what we saw, how we saw it, and what we understood it to be. And when news changed from being a reporting process to an entertainment process, that even got more exacerbated. So here we are with OTT, which is a platform that comes in, it's for internet connectivity, meaning that as long as you have a means to communicate with it to the TV, and that goes to your Rokus, your Apple TVs, your Google TVs, your Fire Sticks, your Amazon, then you have the medium to put content on it. Just for the very reason we have our show here on a TV channel, a hospitality channel. It is an OTT channel. It is a TV station. This is a TV show. We broadcast on the TV. You can watch it because you can go on any of your providers, the Rokus, the Apples, the Google, the Amazon, and look for the hospitality channel, and then from it, watch our show. You can see our content. I don't need to have a broadcast radio tower, TV tower. I don't have to go through all the expenses of franchises and licenses and so forth, and whether I can get into a market or not. I'm not in that, but here I am global. What we do on TV is represented in over 200 countries around the world. And anybody that has these products, the Rokus and so forth, and has the legal means in the country where they allow the broadcasting to come through, they can watch our TV channel. And I don't need to have a radio channel or pay a channel to give this content out to. Well, this whole medium of OTT it's known, but it's not known. It's familiar, but it's not being utilized yet. All too often, if you do watch OTT, if you watch YouTube TV or Peacock TV or Hulu Plus Live or Sling or anything like this, there are times where you see a commercial and then there's a little blank out saying this moment is brought to you by Google TV if you're watching Google TV. Or, commercial will be back to the show soon. That's an unsold portion of advertisement. Now, here's the really cool part about OTT, and we've had this discussion on the live show many times before. OTT allows me to target, just like I would on most online campaigns, demography, geography, and behavioral. I can say that I want my ad, this particular ad, to run in this particular geographic location area to these demographically profiled individuals, okay, the ages and so forth, that are watching because they're interested in travel or they're interested in whatever it is that behaviorally I've identified. We talk about in persona building, actually. And from that, I now can produce and have that ad rendered in front of somebody watching whatever it is that they're watching on their OTT TV, on the channel that I've decided to advertise on. My ad, their neighbor who might be watching the identical channel at the identical time would not necessarily see my ad if they didn't fit my filtered category. So I'm able to target my actual visual medium advertisement to whomever I choose based on the criteria of the filters that I've decided. That's incredibly powerful. We've touted the value of that on the online for a very long time. we've talked about the idea that in Google as a search platform and Bing as a search platform, those are the two largest. There's smaller ones after that, and Bing is small by comparison to Google. We were marveled at the fact that we could identify people so granularly that we could advertise just to the people that we find that have the most interest in what we have to say. Facebook still does a great job of that. It doesn't do as good as it used to do, but it's still a valuable component to that. It has all that data of its users that it can tailor the messages that we decide to pay for them. It's just the accuracy of that reporting, the accuracy of it getting in front of the right people is not as strong as it was 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago. So for that reason, the shift of where things are going is changing. To the end for 2023, I think in a prognostication point of view, OTT advertising is going to just begin to come into its own. There's going to be more people discovering that it is the gateway to get into it is not hard. The real resistance right now that I'm noticing from a lot of places that we're doing advertising for is just a lack of content. Nobody has made a video ad for themselves. Now, some companies have been progressive and they've been making video ads so they can put it on YouTube, advertisement on YouTube, on the website YouTube for visual advertisement. And they've done short snippet kind of stuff for their TikToks or their Instagrams where they have some visualization of their ads. But the medium dictates the message, and an Instagram ad wouldn't play well on the TV ad, OTT ad, because the visualization, the duration of it wouldn't be as persistent as it would be on a video. A video ad has a certain duration that's impactful, and it has a certain progression in most simplest of terms, the beginning, the middle, and an end. Or an Instagram ad sometimes just has a presence. It's there. There's no beginning to the concept. There's no middle to the concept, and there's certainly not an end to the concept. And so because of that, the visualization you may make for one medium doesn't work for the next medium as easily. And so you want to make sure that you're prepared to make the content that you need for OTT TV. And that seems to be the only problem to it. Because right now, working with different channel providers, we've talked about them on the live show. We certainly got very deep with them on our podcast when we talk about particular tools. But we talk about certain platforms like Jamloop and AdCritter, and but now there's mediums that they're actually coming to you directly, like Roku. We have a communication relationship with Roku. We can deal with them because they are provided for a lot of different distributions. So by going to them, they actually can coordinate many platforms we can go to. I have another one that's directly with Hulu, everything related to Hulu. And when you think about its engagement with Disney and ESPN and so forth, it's very, very, very large. It's actually Disney branding, Disney marketing that you're doing. And to be able to say that I can get on those channels and get my content in front of people for very minimal thresholds, $500 for a campaign is a minimum threshold. It's very profound because the value is there. Now, we have to change our metrics. We've had this discussion about ROIs, where ROI can't be the only measuring stick that you use when calculating the value proposition for these ad campaigns. As we know, there is a progression of engagement to go along with our guests. And that progression is discovery, education, okay, and then the possibility, consideration of conversion. And in that process, it's always been thought and perceived that the discovery portion, the very large, I'm talking to a lot of people, but not all of them are going to be interested in me, being very expensive, ROI does not apply to a metric of value. Because if you look at ROI for advertising into discovery, you're spending a lot of money with no real tangible direct value. Now, the direct value goes into our discussion about attribution. Attribution is you may have influenced somebody to at least be aware of you that later at some other time in some other medium for some other reason, they put the two together and they now go and look for you and eventually buy with you. And you may not know that that video ad actually contributed to their decision process because either the time duration was too far away or the correlation was not there between the content of the video versus the reason for the purchase. But there is that connection. As we say, in advertising always, it has to see it 7 times before you begin to believe it. There's a frequency to this as well. So in attribution, and we've had these discussions on the live show repetitively, it's a matter of frequency, time, okay, and duration. And all of those influence the purchase decision. We've always focused and fixated on the very close to the bottom end of when we finally get all the people to a point that they're actually interested in particularly what we have to offer. We're all trying to desperately rush and advertise these people at the point of conversion. And so we're in high competition with other people because everybody else that wants to sell their product to the same people, it's like, okay, we've really filtered them down. They're literally standing on our metaphorical street looking at our hotel. And now we'll walk up to them and give them an offer. But until they show up on our street, we're not going to advertise to them. And I'm saying now we have the affordability and the capability of talking to them. We're still sitting at home thinking about what street they're going to walk to or go or fly to or go to. So OTT will have a higher value. It has the same metrics that are associated with progressively strong advertising now, the targeting capabilities. I would invest heavily in 2023 in the idea of finding resources to develop the rich media that you need to advertise on OTT. Now, that being said, let's talk about the generation of content. We're entering into a very unique time, I feel, with AI in public use, artificial intelligence. There is many progressions up to what is considered AI. A lot of what we label as AI is literally a marketing term for machine language and algorithmic learning. It is not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the ability to, and you can look up these definitions to be more accurate with this. Basically, it's if you remember 2001: Space Odyssey, how the computer that was autonomously capable of creating its own decision-making processes, that's what AI, like Watson for IBM, is AI. Google has its own AI, which it's using already currently for search algorithms and so forth. AI is where it is an entity that it begins to work in the process of understanding its calculation capabilities for the purpose of why it's calculating, not just answering a question in specifics where it takes data and gives a response. To that end, we have things like we talked about last show with the AI, the GPT, which will create content, which has woken Google up because this would fundamentally change how people address their information queries. Google is about giving the solution processes based on a query where if you can actually dialogue and get a two-way response to the process, that is a more interactive knowledge of understanding. Right now, we have to phrase our questions in a way that we understand what the answer would give us or what the answer would be useful for. Where if we don't know what we're asking, but we're trying to get to a point to understand, that requires a two-way dialogue. And AI allows you to do that. We're being presented with platforms that, and we talked about this on last week's podcast, actually, we gave tools like, we talk about AI for audio, AI for images, AI for content. There's going to be a lot of this usage. The problem and the admonishment that we gave in our discussion was that it only uses the context of the content that's available on the internet. It emulates it in the perspective of how a human would say these things, but it would also mean that it only uses the data that's being presented. So if you give it bad data, as the old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out, then you're going to get content used in a way that wasn't accurate content. So a lot of falsehoods. The one thing that AI doesn't do with the GPT and the AI development content is there's no authentication and truth. That accuracy is not a function of the AI. It's accumulation of data and data usage to answer and respond. And so we're going to be faced with a lot of AI generated content. Now, we're not against AI content in any form, except for the predication that it should always be monitored and filtered through an actual person to make sure that it is accurate and truthful, and that it does reflect what was wanting to be said or created. I gave the example that I took GPT and asked it to describe a perfect beach resort, and then gave it to Super Machine, which was an AI that generated image content, and it made this beautiful picture of a resort. And then I took it and gave that context over to another platform that made music based on what I was describing I wanted it to do. And it made this wonderful tropical music sound that was all generated by me. There was not me personally, but what my requests were. But it was really AI was the inception. I wanted this. I gave it to GPT. It described it in a way that I then gave it to another AI that then painted a picture the way I wanted it. That then gave it to another AI that generated the music that went behind it. And literally, there is no copyright or trademark issues because I generated this from my request. It is original creative that I'm able to use. And so for that reason, you get around a lot of worries and issues about licensing and liabilities. But it also gets into a strange new world that if you get more and more accurate with being able to mimic other people, where do you get into what the music industry has been dealing with all this time about plagiarism and taking away too much from the original, too similar to the original, but is how far different that it no longer is the original. It's going to be an interesting world next year, I think, with AI and the content that it gets created from, because as we use more and more, and which I believe are very functional for people that have bandwidth issues, that's where we talk about AI. It can give you the shortcuts. It can stop the writer's block. It can improve your quality of messaging. It can improve the context of your messaging. It can improve the frequency of your messaging. It does a lot of good stuff. But it's going to come into a flood of the market as people begin to rely upon it as a crutch. And we're going to be flooded with more AI. So like literally the last show was, is it AI or is it real? We're going to get into a world where we're going to look for authentication. Think of it similarly through the industrial process that we went through this past century, where anything that was homemade was spurred upon because it was about the manufacturing of the consistency of creating the same thing a million times over, and they're all identical. And people relished in the industrial perspective that it was machine made, that it was identical clone wise as to a previous item that was made, and it lacked that minor differences that homemade or non-industrial created. And people were very much against homemade. They were like, that's old stuff. We want the new stuff. We want cars that look the same, manufacture the same, take a panel off one, put on another one, so kind of thing. And that homemade version of stuff was on the downslide. Then it came back where people were just like, everything's the same. I don't want everything. I want something unique. And they went back and rebounded back to the originality of the homemade or crafted things, artisan created product. I think we're going to go through that same type of cycle. I don't think it's going to happen all in 2023, but I do think we're going to get to the point of where we want non-synthesized music, or AI-created music. We want non-created, AI-created imagery. We want non-AI created content, and have original conversations with people with original perspectives that we know are coming authentically from another person. And I think that is going to be a value proposition that we will live through in 2023 as people begin to first early adopt all these crazy things that AI can do, and then begin to realize that as helpful as they also are distinctly different than what they're replacing, and that there will be some comparison between the two. I think also too in 2023 we're going to have billionaire fatigue finally come to a forefront. What I mean by this is we've always revered our billionaires as being people that ultimately know better than us. We at least defer to them that way because they're billionaires. They've been successful with what they've done, so therefore they must know more or be able to see what we see, but better in their interpretation, because heck, they're billionaires. They succeeded in a way that we haven't succeeded by the very metric that we identify so much with, and that is money. The problem is that we just realized when we look at Elon Musk and what he's doing with Twitter, Bezos, the space race things, and so forth, that they're as human as we are. And that a lot of times, and it really boils down to having the brilliant people around you that you're smart enough to listen to and defer to their capabilities for the unique knowledge that they have, allows you to become successful with it. Yes, they may have financed the SpaceX, and look at how amazingly successful that has been. But that doesn't mean that Elon Musk actually made the Starlinks or made the technology to fly the rocket back down to a drone ship, but he certainly endorsed it, certainly financed it, and certainly had a part that made it influential for it to even succeed. It's not taking anything away from what billionaires can do. But having firsthand experience with working with very affluent people over the years, I called it the same syndrome that doctors and lawyers had. Because they were very successful at the thing that was their chosen profession, they felt that they were very successful at anything they would apply themselves. And that comes from behavior, obviously, and there's a certain level of success. But we defer so much that because they're successful with the one thing, that they must be more successful at other things just inherently because they've already achieved something. That's not the case. I used to open up restaurants for lawyers and doctors, and they're very good doctors and very good lawyers, and way better than I would be because I didn't choose to be either one of them. But they always had an opinion about restaurants that was misplaced. It was a perception that was not based on the actual value or authentication of what the business as a restaurant did. And that came into a lot of conversations at the end where they had opinions about things that would take a detriment to the restaurant. And the only option they were left with at the end of our discussion was, I'm paying for it, that's what I want. And then when it failed that way, their first reaction was it wasn't their fault. I must have done something wrong. And they come back and then I point out what was wrong, and it was their decision. And either went one of two ways. Either they accepted it, being better at the leadership and saying, you know what, you're right. I pushed you into that. It didn't work. I was wrong in that perspective. You were right from the beginning. Let's get back to what it should be to work. And we moved on. Or they just said, no, still can't be me. And those are the two types of people in the world. And we've seen that in the polarity of politics. We've seen it in the polarity of our personalities that are in the market today. So I think 2023, we're going to have a bit of billionaire fatigue, where we peek behind the curtain, Achilles heel kind of stuff, where they're not everything we think that they are. We'll still defer to their success, but we're not going to defer to them that everything they do is successful. And I think Elon has a lot of things to prove with Twitter as to where this comes from, all this. And you even sit back and try to figure, is there a master plan to why he's doing what he's doing with Twitter? And there isn't. It really reflects poorly that he really is a person that is not as clear in what he thought he knew. He had the money to actually do what he wanted to do, but in the end of it, doesn't have the means and wherewithal to make the decisions that are best beneficial to what he thought was the solution to the very reason why he was going through the process of acquisition. So I think that will be something that comes along in 2023. I think also there's two final conclusions of the conversation I want to have to it is I think we're at the end of the impact of COVID as it relates to travel demand. And I mean by that revenge travel and surge travel and this flood, this tsunami of opportunities that come from summer or holidays. And I say this in two parts. One is the exploitation our industry has done on rates and prices. Whenever we had this demand that was available to be recognized, our lack of services are throwing out the window our service scores and our reviews with the idea that we were what I call the Disney mentality, that if you don't like the price, get out of line because there's somebody right behind you that will pay it. We were like that with our hotels. We had back of the door rack rates for hotels that had no service operations going on. Restaurants were closed, spas were closed. It didn't make a difference. We're still charging absolute premium rate simply because the demand was there to be able to do that. Sure, we're in business. It's meant to be business to be profitable. We're out to leverage this, but we threw away our guest service for that. And we minimized our services because we didn't have the labor force to support it. We've gone through these conversations over the past couple of years. Going through this, well, I think 2023 is the beginning of the we lay in the bed that we make. We have been that way for 2 years. And when you add the fact that industries responded in what industries do, and the airlines is where I'm going to step to next, where they have failed miserably at doing the right thing the right way. They follow business acumen to a T. All right, business is going down. We need to maintain our liquidity, our asset value, our ownership to public stock. Let's cut back all of our pilots and retire them early to reduce our costs associated with them. So we're not paying all these people by contract to fly planes that nobody's going to get on. We can't, let's cut the cost. Let's save all that kind of money that we can. And then when the demand came back, they took the attitude that hoteliers took, which is like, hey, we only have these many planes. We're going to charge you premium rate. And they had the summer meltdown, bad summer meltdown. Everybody had it. I mean, it was a terrible thing all summer. Well, lessons learned. Everybody said we learn from that. We're going to be better at it. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. The FTC one came in and said we're going to monitor these people. They've all committed that they're going to do better. And here we are in the middle of the residual of what happened for the holidays. Just goes to show, as much as you know, storms do happen that are at a scale that are unprecedented, and the impact is unprecedented. And what happened is so the models of how airlines operate have come into the focus. We've condemned hub and spoke as a modality for airlines for years because of the increased need to have connecting flights. Why can't I just go from here to here instead of go from here to there to over there? Why do I have to keep doing that? Why do I have to go to Orlando all the time when I'm in Delta? Why do I have to go to Dallas all the time when I'm in American Airlines? Why do I have to go to Chicago all the time with United? Those kind of things. So Southwest said, hey, we have this idea. We're going to do point to point. We're going to make a plane go from here to there and there to there. And then that way we can always get you direct flights. We have more direct flights to offer and we can keep our costs down, but we can still charge you as much, whatever. And here Southwest has a meltdown. And it wasn't just their model. The model actually works relatively well. And there are, I'm sure, many other contingencies. In my small way of looking at it, there's so many ways to back up off the ways of doing this that the plane didn't make it from point A to point B. to make it to point C, that there was a backup point B that could be used for the lack of mechanical to get to point C. I'm sure those were in there. The problem that really came from this is that it was so much about bringing money in and so much about not spending money that we had, and I'm talking about Southwest, that they didn't improve their tech stack. And they didn't have the internal infrastructure to handle the variance of a changing business model. They didn't invest in their tech stack. If this doesn't sound hauntingly familiar, I don't know what it can be. That is literally the bane of hotels right now. And I'll call out brand for this. I look back at when Marriott acquired Starwood, and Starwood was ready to launch Valkyrie, which was a whole new property management system platform, PMS platform. They basically shelved it. They took it because it was direct competition to Marcia anyway, and the implementation cost would be astronomical. Its functionality was much better than Marcia. I mean, we often joke that Marcia is nothing more in the bottom of Bethesda, a gerbil and a wheel. It's so old and based on so many onion layers of technology that at its core, it's a fundamental DOS program that's running in probably some very old box in the middle of nowhere. Unplug it and the world cascades down. Obviously, Marcia has been improved and so forth. It still has its flaws. And you're still looking at a green screen with carriage changes on keyboards. Think about it. GDS is no more different than it has been since the mid-'60s because the investment into the process isn't there. And I think if anything from the lessons learned of what's happened currently with Southwest Airlines is that as just as many times as you avoid the bullet in times past, like, well, we didn't have to worry back then. It came really close, but the system still worked or it still did what it was supposed to do. There will come a time, there will be a time that you will have happen to you what happened to Southwest. So with hotels, and I speak more to the independent hotels, it always gets deferred. The can gets kicked down the road. And the industry is literally built around supporting that process. And that is that we'll just keep giving you upgrades as long as you stay in our ecosystem. And so for that reason, you have software systems that don't do all the things that they could do based on other software systems, but because their enticements to stay with the same platform and only offer moderate costs to go up in levels of service, it doesn't give you all the things that other places do, but it keeps you in the game, like saying, well, at least this year we don't have to go through that huge expense of changing our tech stack. At least this year we don't have to put into our budget. It's like musical chairs. You don't want to be caught with a bag of poop at the end when the music stops. That I'm the year that we had to eat the PMS updates and the tech stack updates. And then, of course, the industry is completely based on technology separation, that the ability to play with other platforms, like here I have a great platform that does one thing, but I need to create a CRM interface. But that CRM interface, as willing as they are to connect to my system is not willing to connect to it, or at least not cheaply. And they want to offer their own CRM solution that's not as good as the CRM solution I want to plug to. So now you have problems of what works with what exclusively, so that they force you to work with their software systems to charge you more money for, when there's a better system out there. Free economies don't work in tech stacks. So then you have the all-inclusive tech stacks, the OYO stacks, but so to speak, where it's an all-inclusive thing. Their platform handles all components to this. The problem is with these systems is that they're built on acquired systems internally that are made to work together, but aren't fundamentally built together. And because of that, they run into problems where when something breaks, there's no other solution to fix it because it's the only solution that's connected to the rest of the stack. So it has its problems. Now, there's other things on the world other than tech stacks for hotels. There's tech stacks for marketing. I think Milestone has done a phenomenal job of creating an entire ecosystem, our marketing strategy, integrations, and so forth. I think Sendyne's done a horrendous job in some ways. I mean, they've tried to fix certain things, but they offer a Pandora's box of everything. But they're one of those systems that literally has hybrided other systems to talk to other systems, but they don't really talk in full fluidity. And so it creates issues when the systems basically don't have full connectivity. Maybe they're one-way APIs. Maybe they're conditional two-way APIs. They've been made to work together, but they don't truly functionally work completely together. They weren't built together, let's put it that way. So you have all these diversities as to tech stacks. And I'm not here to beat up on Sendyne. They do great things, as well as the fact that Milestone made the poor things. But in all, there's contrast between everything. The idea is that you have to evaluate the longevity of what you're currently using in such a way to know whether when you're going to bite the bullet. You have to get off the ROI wagon. And I think in 2023, we will have to get off of the ROI all-encompassing filter that everything has to go through to determine anything. It's like always having to ask the one question before you ask any other questions. And it's not fair because ROI doesn't fix for everything. We've had conversations about this in a multitude of ways. ROI is not an unreliable number. It's a valid number. It's a valuable number. It's not the only number, and it shouldn't be the first one that everything has to go through before any other questions get asked. It's kind of like RevPAR. RevPAR is a basic standard number. Is it the best way of calculating total performance? No, but it's the most accepted number of evaluating performance. And so ROI is the same. And it's always been the dagger to a conversation where some little smart person or wannabe smart person in a group conversation, well, what's going to be ROI with that? And if it doesn't pass that muster of what the minimum ROI that the company is perceiving as valuable, then they've put a dagger of doubt into the presentation as to, well, if it's not going to give us that kind of ROI, what else is it not doing? And it creates this doubt cycle. ROI is a great, useful tool. It's not the only tool, and it's not the first tool only. If the hammer doesn't work, then nothing else works after it. It's kind of what you're saying. It's like then everything looks like a nail. So ROI, as useful as it is, should not be the first and only filter of all decisions. And it goes to tech stacks. Again, Southwest is probably the best, clearest perspective of that process. Look what happens when you don't do it, and look what the damage it's going to be doing to it. Not only are you losing potential business or current business, but you're losing a future value of the company because the reference point that people are going to have is like, remember December 2022? Yeah, well, that was Southwest. And they left out the buy, everybody else recovered. They didn't. Whatever, people are going to formulate their own answer to that question. For that reason, you have to be concerned about things that, yes, this is the year the music stops and it's time to get the tech stack done. But also, I think it is an indication to us as to what 2023 might be like. We're not going to be able to call high rates as much as we used to. I'm not saying this of everybody. There's no general way that everybody says it's going to happen to everybody the same way. There's going to be hotels that are going to be able to command massively high rates. The luxury travel segment has never really been hurt that much by everything that's been going on. There might be demand cycle, but not the rate cycle. The ADR is still there. The idea is that I think 2023, we're going to have a little bit of a hangover from our exploitation of the past 2 years. I think the revenge travel cycle is over. I think our rate tolerance is going to be diminished. I think we're going to see we're going to see a large rate readjustment perspective. Right now, everybody says what they always say at the beginning of every year. Rate's going to be this, and it's going to grow 3 to 5%, 3 to 7%, 4 to 7%, whatever. And 6 months in, massive realignment. We're actually going to be down this much. We base it on expectation, actually. We know this is what the optimism followed by pessimism or reality. I think we're going to have factors that are going to influence that. I think we're going to have a lingering taste as to the desperation of that. The systems that we're just taking for granted to operate correctly, flight systems, hotel systems, through the failures that have already happened and the ones that might still be yet to come. I think there's going to be a skepticism for travelers, a more direct communication requirement. And for that, they're going to need direct communication capabilities. And if you're not up on your game on communication, you're not up on your game on conveying what you have to say and being able to receive what's being said back to you, you're going to find yourself at a detriment compared to those that are. So those are my prognostications for this year. I hope that you agree with some of them and disagree with them, whatever it is. If you have an opinion about any of these or any of your own that you would like to share, I will be happy to share with always. Just so you know, we always have a talkback function that we do for the podcast and we also do for the live show. The link to it is jo.my, /talkback. Actually, I'm sorry, I improved that. It's hdm.news/talkback. And on there, you can actually record yourself and say whatever you want to say and give a comment or feedback and answer a question. I always throw a question up there that you can answer. And just audio record back and then give us permission of whether we can quote you, whether we play your audio back, or whether we just refer to somebody said such as whatever it is. We identify or not identify, but you can give feedback to us. So just go to hdm.news/talkback and give us your comments as to what you think are things to expect in 2023 as well. If you want to send me an email as to this show, any show, podcast, I answer each and every one of them. you can go to Loren at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com, and I answer all emails. And if you would like to join us on the show, you're more than welcome to. We are going to be doing some interesting shows coming up next month. We're getting some of the old band back together. We're going to do about a couple of people that they missed the dialogue, the banter of having several talking heads discussing a topic. So we're going to do a couple of shows this month with that, or I should say January. So it should be fun for those to come back, bring some of the old folks back. And if you have any suggestions of people that you think should join the show, by all means, send me an email and let me know who they are, and I'll reach out to them and we'll qualify all that and get them on the show if that works out for them. So with that, obviously we're past the wishing you a Merry Christmas and Festivus and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, but I do get to wish you a very happy New Year, a Western New Year. Chinese New Year's coming up. But I do hope you have a very happy, safe, and healthy end of the year, start of 2023. And I hope that all of your positive expectations of 2023 come true. So with that, my name is Loren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.